He was 17 years old when he became the most powerful man in the world. There was no war, no coup, no years of political maneuvering. One morning he was the emperor's stepson, and by the afternoon he was emperor of Rome. What happened in the 14 years that followed is not simply a story about cruelty. It is a story about what absolute power does to a person who was never prepared to hold it, and what happens when the people closest to that person choose, one by one, to stop telling the truth. Nero Claudius Caesar was born in 37 AD into a family in which survival required performance. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, was one of the most politically capable women of the ancient world, calculating, patient, and entirely willing to use her son as the instrument of her own ambition. She maneuvered Claudius into adopting Nero, maneuvered Claudius into naming him heir, and is widely believed by ancient historians to have arranged Claudius's death by poison in 54 AD to ensure the succession happened on her terms rather than his. Nero did not build his path to power. He was placed on it. This distinction matters more than it might appear. The founders of dynasties, the Augustus Caesars and the Cosimo de' Medicis, arrive at power through a process that teaches them something about its limits. They have competed, lost ground, recovered, miscalculated, and corrected. The education is costly, but real. Nero skipped this entirely. He inherited the principate at an age when most people are still learning the consequences of ordinary decisions, and he inherited it from a mother who had spent years insulating him from the feedback that failure provides. The early years of Nero's reign were, by most historical accounts, genuinely capable. The philosopher Seneca and the Praetorian prefect Burrus guided the young emperor through his first years with a steadiness that kept the administration functional and the Senate relatively placated. The period was later recalled, even by critics of Nero, as one of competent and moderate governance. Taxes were reviewed. The Senate was consulted. The worst excesses of Claudius's paranoid later years were reversed. But this stability was not Nero's achievement. It was his advisors. And as Nero aged into his power, the tension between the governance his advisors were providing and the life he wanted to live became impossible to sustain. Nero wanted to perform. Literally, he wanted to sing, to act, to compete in public theatrical and musical competitions, to be recognized not as a military commander or a political architect, but as an artist. In Roman aristocratic culture, this was not merely unusual. It was considered beneath the dignity of an emperor to perform publicly, to expose the imperial person to the judgment of an audience, to be seen competing rather than ruling. His advisors told him so. His mother told him so. And Nero, who had never learned to receive unwelcome information as useful, experienced these objections not as counsel, but as constraint. This is the first recognizable turn. Not a descent into cruelty, not yet, but a withdrawal from accountability. He began surrounding himself with people who enthusiastically supported his artistic ambitions, who applauded his performances, who understood that their proximity to power depended on their willingness to confirm what Nero wanted to believe about himself. The claque that paid applauders he brought to his performances to ensure the audience's response became, in a broader sense, the model for his entire court. Approval on demand. Enthusiasm as a professional obligation. In 59 AD, Nero had his mother killed. The ancient sources describe the planning in detail, a rigged boat designed to collapse and drown her, and when she survived that, the dispatch of assassins to her villa. The act was not impulsive. It was deliberate, organized, and carried out because Agrippina had continued to involve herself in imperial affairs, continued to position herself as a co-ruler, continued to say things that Nero did not want to hear. The murder of Agrippina was not the beginning of Nero's transformation. It was the completion of a process that had been running for years, the systematic removal of everyone who told him the truth. Seneca, who had been his moral anchor, became increasingly peripheral and eventually compelled to suicide. Burrus died, possibly by poison, in 62 AD. The two people most capable of honest counsel were gone, and the people who replaced them were selected for a quality that has destroyed powerful men in every century. They were selected for their willingness to agree. What followed over the next 6 years has given Nero his historical reputation, the persecution of Christians following the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, whether or not he caused it. The extravagant construction of the Domus Aurea, his vast golden palace built on land cleared by the fire, the execution of senators on conspiracy charges, real and imagined, the forced suicide of Seneca following the Pisonian conspiracy of 65 AD. But the pattern beneath these events is more instructive than the events themselves. A court that has been systematically cleared of honest voices does not produce better decisions over time. It produces worse ones, because each bad decision is met with the same structure of enthusiastic affirmation that met the good ones, and the leader loses the ability to distinguish between the two. Nero was not receiving information about how his reign was being experienced outside the palace. He was receiving a performance of support, and he had, through years of rewarding that performance, made it the only kind of communication available to him. By 68 AD, the governors of the provinces were in open rebellion. Galba in Spain, Vindex in Gaul commanders who had concluded that the emperor was not worth the loyalty he demanded. When the Senate finally declared Nero a public enemy, it did so not with drama, but with the tired practicality of an institution that had been waiting for the opportunity. The Praetorian Guard, whose sole professional purpose was the protection of the emperor, declined to act in his defense. Nero fled Rome in disguise. He was 30 years old. He had been emperor for 14 years. He died by his own hand in a freedman's villa outside the city, reportedly requiring a companion to help him complete the act. His last words, if the ancient sources are to be believed, a lament that the world was losing a great artist. The contrast between that self-understanding and the reality of his reign is not merely poignant, it is diagnostic. A man who had spent 14 years hearing his performances praised without reservation had arrived, at the end of everything, at a genuine belief in his own artistic greatness that no evidence could touch. The insulation had been so complete and had operated for so long that it had ceased to be insulation and had become simply his understanding of the world. Across the long history of power, this process recurs with a consistency that suggests it is not a personality defect, but a structural one. The problem is not that powerful people are uniquely susceptible to flattery, they are not. The problem is that power changes the incentives of everyone around the powerful person in ways that systematically reward agreement and punish honesty until the information environment around the leader has been so thoroughly curated that honest assessment becomes structurally impossible. Nero did not begin as a monster. He began as a 17-year-old who had been prepared for performance and not for governance, placed inside a system that rewarded the wrong things, and surrounded over time by people who understood that their survival depended on his satisfaction. What he became was, in part, the product of what that system selected for. This does not diminish the real suffering of real people under his reign. It does not excuse what happened. But it offers something more useful than condemnation. It offers a pattern. The pattern of a leader who confused the absence of resistance with the presence of wisdom, who mistook applause for truth, who removed, one by one, every voice capable of telling him what he needed to hear until the silence around him was total and the fall, when it came, arrived without warning. It always arrives without warning. That is what the silence is for.